Okay, says we're live. All right, Yeshua, I pray that you would bless this time, help us to understand what labor is, what work is, what a worker is, what creation is, what a servant is, what a master is. Teach us. I just ask this in Yeshua's name. Amen. Okay, so this is going to be our first discussion on what is work. What is work? I would like to primarily stay in a very, very, very small section of the Torah. So in Genesis chapter 2, we have the explanation of Shabbat. Okay? We have the explanation of why Shabbat. What is Shabbat? Why do we keep Shabbat? Okay? So I'm going to read the LEB. And we're in Genesis chapter 2, and I'm going to actually start in verse 1 and work through verse 3. All right? And it might be helpful for me to take to have my Hebrew up in front of me. Okay. And the heaven and the earth and all their array or their hosts were completed, brought to their completion. Okay? That's verse 1. Verse 2, and he finished God in the day the seventh. Pay attention to this word. He finished the work, is how it's translated in English, but malachto. He finished his malach. No, I'm sorry. He finished his malacha, his work. Okay, malachto, by adding the taf at the end and putting the o sound, it means it was his work. It was the work he did. Okay, so he finished his work. I first want to make you aware of something. The word here used for work is a specialized term. In fact, when you see the concept of slavery and work and difficulty and other places in the Torah, it does not use this specialized term. It uses a term, avodah, which is related to the word for eved or slave, okay, like hard, work. Okay, that tends to be the word that is used the most frequently. This is a more specialized term. So God on the seventh day stopped from all of his work, which he did. Malachto asher asa, the work he was doing, okay. Vayish bot, and he ceased, or Sabbathed, or Shabbated, he ceased, okay, or brought because it was completed. Another way to say this, cease is not the best translation in English. Rest doesn't cut it either. Finalized is probably a good way to think of it. He finalized, bringing it to its final form, right? Dragon Ball Z, this is not my final form. This was the final form of his work is one way to see that, okay? So, but that is tricky. So he finishes, so he ceases, he finalizes in the day the seventh from all his work. Again, this word, malachto, now, which he did, okay, verse 2. So he finished from all of his work which he did. Now, again, this is work, and the verb using there is asa. This word can be translated did, okay, but it also can be translated made.
Yeah, this asa versus bara.
Asa versus bara. Asa is used in Genesis 1, and we translate it, he created or he made. Okay, asa can be translated to make or to do. All right? They're translating it do here because they are landing hard on translating malacha as work, which is an abstraction. In English, we don't say, let's think of something we create, a pottery pot, or say, we don't say, I did the pottery pot. Okay, that's not an activity. We say, I made the pottery pot. Okay? But they're translating it did because they wanted to translate this word work as the abstract idea of just work. Okay? The activity. It's not the activity. The word malachto, the word malacha, actually speaks to things. Arranged items, objects even to a degree. Okay? Which makes sense, right? Because in Genesis 1, we see the sun, the moon, the stars, the land, these things, right? Okay? it would be funny that chapter 2 would be a sudden about face, and now all of a sudden it's discussing God's work abstractly. Hello. Hi, we still see you. Thank you. Okay, and we're going to go to verse 3. Now, this is an interesting verse. It opens up, and he blessed, okay, Vayvarech Elohim, and he blessed the seventh day, okay, Vaykadesh Oto, and he sanctified it. The day itself is made holy or cleansed, sanctified, okay. Because in it, Shabbat, he finalized or completed. Finalized or completed. Now this is where it starts to get weird. How do your versions read the last clause? From, he rested from. Let's hear that out loud. Somebody give me the LEB or some version. I don't care what version. NASB, some Bible you have.
Sorry, the Hebrew.
Verse 3.
God blessed the seventh day and he sanctified it because on it he rested from all his work of creating that there was to do.
Doesn't that sound stupid in English?
Yeah.
Read it again.
Yeah. And God blessed the seventh day and he sanctified it because on it he rested from all his work of creating that there was to do.
Okay, that's the LED. Okay, I'm going to put that, I'm actually going to write that down. Okay. Great. Okay. LEB, say it again, the last part. He rested from what?
Because on it he rested from all his work of creating that
Pause. He rested from all his work. What?
that there was to do.
So wait, it wasn't creating in there? He rested
from all his work of creating
that
there was to do.
All his work of his work. All his creating of his creating.
Was to do. YouTube celebrities. We are doing. Are you joining in?
Yeah, he's gonna join. That's what you had said.
I love it. We're actually gonna go. We're going through Genesis 2. Great. Do you need something to write with? Do you want your rocket book?
No.
Okay. Cool. All right. So this is kind of stunted and weird. Could somebody give me let's use a more NIV or what's NASB?
NIV is worse.
Okay.
NASB. Let's hear NASB. Well, we want to hear it.
I'll do NIV.
I want to hear a figurative one.
Standard, the New American Standard is verse 2 or 3.
At the end of verse 3, he rested.
End of verse 2.
When we get to
he rested from all his work, which God had created and made.
His work, which, now that sounds better, but it's weird. He rested from all his work, which what? Which God
Had created.
had created. Okay.
And worked.
Had created.
And made.
And made.
And made. Now, they're getting closer to the actual idea, but this makes no sense. So at least now the main problem with the NASB is why this word work? It's very weird. We don't use the verb made for an activity in English. We tend to use the word did. Okay. What about the NIV? What does it do? Out of curiosity.
NIV is because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done.
All the work of
Creating that he had done.
that he had done. Now, it sounds pretty. So, I mean, they're dynamic equivalence translations, so they're trying to get around it and make it intelligible so it makes sense in English. But they're getting away from the original meaning. The more literal translations are striving to try to get across this weird thing God had done. Also, the word, here's a hint. Malacha, this idea of work, okay? It's not in Genesis 1. The noun isn't used in Genesis 1. So that's weird. Why are they using a word to summate or summarize everything in Genesis 1 that didn't occur in Genesis 1? Right? Okay. So we have different ways to translate this word. Okay? I'm gonna put forward one that I think is helpful. Okay? And I'm gonna, before I put forward that way, I'm gonna read a verse to you, and I want you to tell me where the word work occurs.
And if it doesn't say the word work, it doesn't occur.
Great. Okay, somebody read to me Exodus 31, verses 2 through 2 through 5. Exodus 31, 2 through 5.
Good preference there. I knew you were going to go here. This is great.
Okay.
All right, do you have a preference on the translation?
No, this is great. Go for it.
Okay. See, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, from the tribe of Judah, and I have filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, and with skill, and with knowledge, and with every kind of craftsmanship, to devise designs, to work with gold, and with silver, and with bronze, and in stone cutting, for setting, and in cutting wood, for doing every kind of craftsmanship.
Yeah. Where is the word?
I heard the word work regarding gold and silver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not where it occurs. So that's interesting.
Says, to devise designs to work with gold and silver.
Is it filled?
Nope.
Craftsmanship?
It's craftsmanship.
Nice. Clay for the win.
Craftsmanship. That's this word. So the NASB is pretty damn close in trying to translate Genesis 2. We're in, that was 3, I think. The last part, 2, 3, clause B. So let's change it. So we're
In
going to.
context, it's saying all the same thing.
They are saying the same thing, but what's weird is what I'm trying to draw
This
attention to.
craftsmanship, this is work with the gold. You know what I mean?
It is,
All
but
these things. You can't be a craftsman. You can't work and be a craftsman at the same time. Apart from each other.
yes, but
You wouldn't have
this
been called.
craftsmanship. But this is part of what I'm trying to draw out.
It's a Venn diagram.
This is, let me give you an example, okay? I'm glad you asked the question. Let me give you an example. Beef, cow, who gives a shit? We know what I'm talking about. When that big brown animal is eating grass in the field, hey, look at that pretty beef. We don't say that, okay? We also don't say, I prefer my cow rare. Okay, these are weird. We don't mix it up, okay? That's because of the French overtaking the Anglo-Saxons and language and whatever. But the point of it is we have rules for when we use synonyms at certain times, yeah? We know when we use it. The same goes for them. So a question I have is, are there rules associated with this word? Malacha. When God is the subject? Yes, there are. Are there rules, contextual rules surrounding this word that would dictate when it's used? Yes, there are. It is a cultic word, meaning not cult like. Okay, the word
It's a
cult.
temple word.
It's a technical. The word cult is a technical word for a holy place or a shrine. It's a temple-related word. It's a temple-related word. So who is Bezalel, for example? That's the guy.
The son of Hur?
He's the son of Uri, who is the grandson of Hur.
Oh, okay.
Okay, remember Hur is the guy who held up one of
It's
Moses'
technically
sons.
true because son, there's no
That's
grandson.
true. That's right. You're right. You're right. So Hur held up one of Moses' arms. Aaron held up the other one. Okay.
Then the only other time Hur is mentioned is when Moses goes up the mountain, and he's like, Aaron and Hur are here so they can deal with your.
They're in
And then he's
charge.
gone when Moses comes back.
They're in
and the
charge.
golden calf
Hur
is
is
set up.
gone.
He's
Yeah.
not mentioned.
He's not mentioned.
Yeah, so there's a Jewish tradition which you don't have to buy into it, but it's interesting. And it's helpful for us if you want to share the gospel of Yeshua the Messiah with a Jewish person who has been exposed to the Talmud or Jewish tradition. The tradition is Hur was killed by the Israelites who demanded an idol. And Aaron,
Really?
This could be why Aaron was so afraid.
and Aaron, this is the Jewish tradition. Listen to this now. And Aaron, because he capitulated out of fear lest he die too, he went ahead and built the idol. But Hashem, God said, because he has laid his life down for my holiness, I have merited him the right for his seed to rise up, a seed of Judah who will come and build my house for my name to dwell.
Oh, or is of the tribe of Judah?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, so he's a Judean who literally by laying down his life, the seed rises up to come and erect the house for God and build it. It's crazy.
Sweet.
But craftsmanship, okay? This is kind of what I want to work on though. I want to keep it very primitive, very low level, okay? Very focused, all right? In English, we'll start there to a degree. Okay, the worker.
Sorry, can you give what is the word itself? Can you give like a transliteration? Just like something that I can write down.
Yeah.
Since I don't know Hebrew.
Okay. You can go. I don't know if you've ever seen that thing before. It's like a little upside down E. It's like a schwa. It means like a little It's an sound.
Okay.
Ma, la, cha. Malacha. Okay? Or if you want it, you could just say ma. I don't know how you do it. Ma, la.
I just need a placeholder. Really.
That's great. Figure it, yeah, whichever one you prefer. So,
Cool.
The worker works. The worker works the work. Okay? It's a terrible sentence. For us, it's helpful. If the work here is craftsman, if the work here is craftsmanship, okay. What is the work? Okay, here's something that's weird.
It's craft.
It's literally called, it can be translated two ways. This is malachut, which can mean message, or more generically, watch this, representation. Representation, either abstractly or literally. And the worker is just the word you know well for angel, malach.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to the similarities. Malach, malachut, malacha. Okay, malach is angel. You know this because in Hebrew, if I want to say something that's mine, I just add e to it. Okay, so la is for. If it's for me, it's li. Okay, if El is God, well, how's he my God? Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, right? Eli, my God. How do I say my angel? Malachi, Malachi. The last book of the Old Testament is my angel. Malachi. I would say that for us to figure out what work is, so that I don't make you run all over the Bible, if you want some kind of background to Genesis 2, verses 1 through 3, go to Malachi and read the book of Malachi. Because at least 1, 2, 3, 4 angels are named. One of the angels is Aaron. God says, there's no faithful angel or messenger like look at my servant Aaron, the high priest. He was faithful because he's kind of chastising and rebuking the priesthood. And he's saying, you guys aren't angels. You guys you're not faithful. You're not my faithful messengers, okay? This is what's interesting though. How can the word message correlate to the word representation? Okay? How can this word representation, if you can look at it, you can kind of see that representation would have some kind of correlation to craftsmanship. It's because of distance. It's literally geography. All this boils down to geography. God, El Shaddai, El Elyon is probably the best way to think of him in this regard. El Elyon is God the Most High. Okay? Which, that would be what Dave Chappelle would call God. El Elyon, God the Most High. Okay? Geographically, he is above all. He is above all. It's a literal way to interpret that. A literal translation of this is God on top of all, or God the most on top. Okay? in order, this is an ancient idea, so you have to understand the basics of the idea to understand how it got developed foundationally. One of the most basic ideas is God is the most high God. Okay? He's the God up there. Very, very simple foundational idea. Well, what's he doing up there? Dude, he's kinging. He's the king. He's sitting enthroned. Okay? Just to check on what I'm saying, go to Psalm 9, go to Psalm 110, there are all kinds of places in the Old Testament that will make statements like, God sits enthroned forever. Like he never gets up. Because in the ancient times, a king who stands from his throne is a power vacuum. Someone's going to fill that seat. God never leaves his throne is another way to say God is God. For the ancient person to hear God is eternal, God's rule is unchallenged, God is above all, they don't think they're not the ancient Semites. Okay? They don't think like the Greeks, and they're not as into abstractions like that. They are saying he sits forever. So how the hell does he come down here if he sits forever? Right? Everyone's got problems they got to solve with God.
His right hand does it.
That's one solution to the problem is he stays seated when he goes like this. He reaches down. Okay, that's one visualization to solve that problem. Another solution for that problem is the Malach Elohim, or the Malach Panim, the angel of his presence, the angel of God, the angel of God, not a angel of God.
Panim is like mouth, right?
Panim is face.
Oh, okay.
Pei is
mouth.
lips. Yeah.
Panim is face.
Pei is mouth. That's right. Pei is mouth. Sophatai is lips. Yeah.
Okay.
So God, how does he come down? Well, we solve that problem multiple ways. One of them, though, is the angel of his presence. Here's where it starts to come into play. Think of it like a plane of existence. The most high plane is where God is. I don't care if you want to populate that with 2 steps or infant. I don't give a shit. Populate it with a gazillion steps in between. He's at the top. Okay? The reason for this is in part he concerns himself with the bottom. This is a character claim. God desires to work at lower levels, and he concerns himself with the lowest of levels. This is beginning to be diametrically opposed to the way that the Greeks talk about God, the way that Catholics inherited thinking about God, the way that the Western mystics, the way that Western Christianity has ended up imbibing ideas about God. Now, if you go to a typical Protestant church and you say, Alpha, let's learn about God. The first thing they'll tell you are words that mean nothing experientially and aren't in the scripture. He's omnipotent, he's omniscient, he's omnipresent, he's omnibenevolent. None of this shit is the way that the scriptures talk about God or the way that God talks about himself. Like, God really missed an opportunity, Alpha class teacher, when Moses said, tell me who you are and reveal yourself to me. And God said, Yahweh, Yahweh, El, the victorious. No, the compassionate. Yahweh, Yahweh, the smiter of evil. No, the gracious.
It's just the wrathful.
Yeah, not literally the opposite. The slow to anger, overflowing with loyal love and faithfulness. When God reveals himself to Moshe, he is the benefactor of all of his traits are the lowest of low. So he concerns himself with the low. To keep intact that idea that God truly reigns as a king and the throne is uncontested, you have these ideas of his right hand, the angel of his presence, the messenger of his presence. Here's what that speaks to. It just speaks to distance. This is something that's so simple. That's why we have to spend a good amount of time talking about it. As moderns, this is so hard for us. Okay, right now I'm talking to us in a room with electricity. We're able to be covered. We're here. We can discuss something in books that were printed. We can carry ideas that way. I'm talking over the internet. Right? There's the camera. People. In ancient times, literally, the task of communicating from one region to another, if that distance increased, it becomes more and more perilous with every step. This is dark. It is a common trope in history. Oh, I had a brother, but he went on a journey and we never fucking heard from him again. Right? Like, I My dad left to go do this thing, and we think he died in this place based on what someone else said in the town, but we're not sure. We've never seen him again. Okay, or even worse, a guy goes on a journey and doesn't come back for 2 decades because he was enslaved, or he was, it's just perilous. Okay, so
Or our brother died to a goat.
sure, right? There's all kinds of, there are threats and difficulties, but very simply, let's pretend there are no difficulties other than the distance itself. And I have a message to carry. A representation. A representation will require, and to a degree, a representative. That's what a malach is. An angel is a representative. We hear it in English when we say a representative. We can see it in the word present. We understand when we say representative. It's someone who stands in the place of. Another good term in English is a proxy.
Well, people literally use the term, I rep this.
I rep it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so God has multiple representatives. In fact, you could argue God's whole scheme, God's whole game with creation is the game plan is simply, instead of turtles all the way down, representation all the way down. That would be one way to describe this. This is his aim. Because what's being presented? Him. This is where we get the catch-all, cornerstone important idea we see in Genesis 1. It does actually, the question is how does Genesis 1 go to Genesis 2? This is a question that eludes people, and it's difficult, and it leads to all kinds of competing theories and bullshit and whatever. Okay, there are differences in the narratives, but I think the author is aware of those differences. It's not because of conflict. We get to this from the word Selam, Elohim. The image of God. Image of God. We say image, I don't know what your mind conjures. As a modern, we probably conjure a photograph or a picture or something like this. But to widen your understanding of this word, the word selam, which is the word being translated image, the word selam is also the word for shadow. The word selam is also the Hebrew word for form. Form. Okay? Image of God. Okay? It would be like,
From what verse?
this is, I don't know, I think it's Genesis 1, it's between 1:27. It's like maybe between 24 to 27. I think it's the blessing. He made them in his image, male and female, he made them. So they bear his image. They're not the only image bearers. Humanity is not, they're not the only ones who bear his image. These malachim, these representatives, these angels, they bear his image as well. Okay? They bear his image as well. I'm going to constantly, I talk about it a lot, but this is helpful too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Reality is like a staircase, a repeating. A staircase is a really good example because a staircase is a repeating structure. Literally, if you build stairs correctly, you want them all to be this fucking identical, right? You don't want them to be different. You don't want special stairs, right? So it's a repeating pattern over and over again. Yeah. So what's your special feat? That's great. All right. You can be God in your scheme. Go somewhere else. So right here, we have this picture. God would be at the top. What is the point of all this? What is the point of God creating and doing this? The aim is going to be Shabbat. Completion. It is not yet complete. You notice something weird in Hebrews? Do you notice that the author of Hebrews said God rested from his work? But we're still working? But eventually we'll enter into that rest with him?
Yeah.
It's a weird little point. And it puts you at odds with John in some ways, because it may be that Yeshua's being more rhetorical and tricky when he's speaking, because Yeshua says, my Father's at work even to this day, and so too am I at work. But the author of Hebrews gives us this picture about reality. The author of Hebrews is focusing on, well, why is the world the way that it is? And why is creation the way that creation is? And the author of Hebrews says over and over again, it's because the game plan for creation is a temple. It reaches its apex and gets completed. When the temple is completed, these representatives of the one up here will cause the lowest level to bear his image. These representatives, it is their job to ensure that people ascend the staircase. Shit. Their job is to make sure they build the staircase. That's what the temple is. The first temple depicted in Scripture is, you ever heard the word Jacob's ladder? Okay, there's no ladder, right? It's not a ladder. It's a soleil. It's a word used for ziggurats. They would call these things ladders to heaven or staircases to heaven. All a ziggurat is, it's one of the most primitive communal structures made. It's wide at the base and goes up narrow. You can increase square footage, but it's basically like a mound structure that functions as a staircase. You know, looked at directly, or overhead rather, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Overhead, it looks like this. All right? Ascending elevated planes that are ever decreasing inside 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we'll do one more because I'm obsessive. 7. Okay. So that's what a ziggurat will look like overhead. When God selects Jacob, when God reveals himself to Jacob, this is what Jacob sees. He sees the work. You hear me? He sees the work continuing. Angels ascending and descending.
Oh.
Okay? And he sees Yahweh standing. Now, the Hebrew is unclear. Some people have depicted Yahweh as standing up here at the top. That's one way to read it. Other people have depicted as Yahweh being on the ground next to Yaakov, showing him the structure, like kind of interacting with him directly. His job, and this is really weird, okay? There are a lot of corollaries. The word for ceasing or completing is, they're going to associate that with rest. They associate with rest. They associate it with sleeping, okay? Yaakov goes to sleep, and he rests his head on a stone. Jacob becomes a living parable for what God says he wants to do. Build me a stone that I can rest my head on. In this place, this same place you rested your head. Because the work of going onward with creation isn't done. I'm not done with this. I want to continue with it. And what does Yaakov do? Yaakov rightly understands the situation. He's a bit tricky. Jacob, he kind of makes a deal. He's like, hey, you get me back safely to dad in peace with food and clothing and all this. And he says something. He says, I'll give you a tenth of what I own, which literally means I'll establish a priesthood, and I'll build a house with this stone that I've laid in my head. He's going to build a house for him. He basically understands God showed him a pattern, and his right response is to erect a temple in that space. Okay? He renames the place from Luz to Bethel or Bethel, house of God. So, very simply, this is a sentence that is tricky, but it can tell you the point of all things. It's like the worker works the work. The angel brings the representation to accomplish the craftsmanship. Okay? You are finishing the job of bringing reality to completion. Okay? So before we go further, I want to make sure that we understand these what I've put out there. Do we have any questions about one of these terms? The messenger, the message itself, or the representation, the work or appointed task or craftsmanship.
Well, so as image bearers, is this like something that our understanding of work can change? Like, I don't know if it's.
Are you asking what's the point of this for believers in regards to how we view work?
Yeah.
Yeah, how is this applied to a believer's understanding of work, or how is a believer to understand work in light of this?
Yeah.
We're on video 1, so I'll be
Yeah.
video 2. And my hope is that if I'm faithful in the small things, one step at a time, we'll get to step 10, and it'll hopefully make more sense.
I want to ask you about Hebrews 1, but
Yeah.
like, I have an answer to it, but I don't know if it's where you're going to go with it. But
Yeah.
Hebrews 1 says, to which of the angels did he say? Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's
now Hebrews is written in Greek, and this is Hebrew, and it's a very different understanding. But the word angelos is used for regular messengers in the New Testament. So to which of the messengers did he say?
Yep.
So then I think that's going to cause a barrier.
It can. I think I know where you're going with it. Tell me why you think it's a barrier.
Because if the
And you can
Malach
respond better.
is the representative who does the work,
Okay.
and Jesus represents the Father or the enthroned one to do the work, then doesn't that on the surface contradict that Hebrews verse?
Good question.
Why?
Did you want to
I
say?
don't see the contradiction. I'm trying to track with you.
Give him the contradiction.
Hebrews 1 literally says, to which of these angels did God ever say, you are my son?
Yeah.
Well, the answer should be none of them, right?
Yes.
That's supposed to be the answer?
Right.
Right. Well, that would make Jesus not an angel, which makes him not a representative,
Yeah.
which means he doesn't do the work.
Yeah, that's right.
Or on the other hand, you
Yeah.
could say all the other angels were deficient in some way, and Jesus, as a messenger, is the exact representation and the radiance of his glory.
Yeah.
That's right.
Right.
Okay, that's one.
Yeah, so I could take the question
Which one of
as,
these messengers did I call my son?
yeah, I could take the
Which one
question
of these
as,
angels?
no, literally, which one?
Right.
And then if I say Jesus, then it's like, well, I guess I did answer the question.
See, I think he.
Oh, you're saying categorically he can't be a messenger.
If the question is meant to be answered, none of them.
I see. Okay, so
Okay.
you're saying if somebody has the objection, Jesus can't be an angel.
Okay.
And
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Okay, so that's the problem. Let's think of this question because you cited, we could hear the question rhetorically with the answer none implied
Right.
and the negative.
Which is how I was raised.
That's short.
Yeah.
You could hear it as literally, which one? There's
Yeah.
got to be somebody.
Yeah.
Okay. Or this is, I'm going to add a third possibility that needs to be explored if you're looking at the particular work of Hebrews. I made a joke about beef and cattle or beef and cows, right?
Mm-hmm.
What ended up happening is the word for cow is Germanic rooted, and so it's related to the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes were Germanic tribes. They took over the Isle of Man, became the Anglo-Saxons. Yay, we're a little Germanic tribe people. Then the Normans came in. They were of Viking descent and they spoke a Proto-French, essentially like a Latinized kind of thing. They came in and enslaved the population of Anglo-Saxons that they didn't kill. The enslaved population functioned feudally, essentially as like serfs. Okay, so one of the great things that keeps a caste distinction intact is you don't speak my language and I don't speak yours. So that's where a lot of our cuss words come from in English, right? A lot of our cuss words are Germanic and guttural in nature. It's actually classism. It's because those dirty little serf people use these language, okay? And when do I call it a cow? When the serfs have to take care of it in the field. And when do I call it beef? When the rich man eats it on the plate. Okay, so there's actually a historical etymological reason that, some of this happens. Well, we have a similar problem going on with the exile. The work of Hebrews is sensitive to the exile and the impact of Hellenism on Jewish thinking. He lands in a way that's way more nuanced. For example, let me give you 3 Ephesian works. You could go, not Ephesian, Alexandrian works. You could look at the work of Philo. Okay. You could look at the Wisdom of Solomon, which is associated with Alexandria, which the work Wisdom of Solomon is quoted directly in verse 3, which is the verse you quoted, that he's the radiance. It's a direct quotation. Apogalsma is the only word. It only occurs in Hebrews 1:3 and only occurs in the Wisdom of Solomon, nowhere else. So there's that. But he does something funny. The author of Hebrews is sensitive to this influx of ideas, and it's a battleground for how to discuss divinity and what God is. So the author lands hard on issues that Philo lands differently on. Okay, he is careful. Apollos is a little more careful. Let me give you an example. When Apollos quotes words, okay, or I'm sorry, when Apollos quotes verses in that segment that you're describing, because he
people
basically
watching you to say why you're saying Apollos.
Sorry. Yeah, so I am positing that the author of Hebrews is Apollos. I'll just say the author of Hebrews. When the author of Hebrews, is drilling out a bunch of different verses in the Old Testament, okay, he does something funny. When he quotes from the Septuagint at times, the Septuagint, which is earlier, dated earlier, is okay with using the word theos for gods or God. He will write angelos. He is now stepping into an evolving tradition. What ended up happening is a lot of Jews became increasingly uncomfortable with referring to the B'nai Elohim, the sons of gods, as divine beings. And what they did is he lives after some of the, basically they said, let's change our language. Let's create a linguistic rule kind of, or what's the word? Not a rule, not a principle, but I know the word, it's eluding me. God, I almost had it. I don't know, a linguistic formula, okay? And when we use the word angelos, we're explicitly referring to lower beings hierarchically. And when we use the word theos, we're only referring to Hashem, okay? And if we're using the word theos not about Hashem, we're only talking about idols. And it's like farcical, okay? So that he is entering, so there is actually a terminological distinction that's already happened by the time Hebrews is composed, and it seems most likely to me that he is existing in the days where most Jews, there's like a pushback against using this idea of theos, and so they want to have a hard line on the word angel. Okay, and what they are forced to do is, if we take a hard line on the word theos, they have a lot of ambiguity about the local Yahweh, which they just live with that ambiguity, and that's just another area of argumentation. But one way to read the question is, when it says angels, it means it post-dating this. We're just going to use the word angelos as a hierarchical distinction from God himself. Okay? And in which case the answer is, then it is rhetorical and it's no one. Right? Because they have one of the problems they will wrestle with is what Greek metaphysics wrestle with is, and they're already aware of it because they're quoting the Wisdom of Solomon. How does God create not God? It's a conundrum, and one of their answers, one of their answers is this in between, this demiurge, this plan, this Wisdom of Solomon grapples with this and articulates things that the author of Hebrews is okay with appropriating. So it's all right that you're in a time of confusion. Like, it's the exile. That's what you get. Sons of bitches, this is the exile. You want things to be crystal clear? Your granddad shouldn't have fucked up so hard, then you'd be in Israel and Yahweh would still be in the temple. Okay? So the exile is part of the curse of the exile is there's confusion abounds. Right? Read Nehemiah. Ezra's like ready to literally rip his hair out and weep and throw himself on the ground because when he gets a hold of these Judeans, like they're like of mixed descent. They can't even speak Hebrew. Right? He's like brokenhearted about it. So there is a Hebrews is right. It's in that tension.
What was the other Alexandrian word?
Philo, wisdom, and there was another one. I can't remember if I'm pretty sure Ecclesiasticus Ben Sirach is associated with Alexandria.
Ben Sirach,
yeah, is associated with Alexandria. Mm-hmm. I say Apollos internally. It makes more sense to me that Apollos authored Hebrews, and then we get a nice, because he was an apostle. It would make sense that his work was accepted. He believes himself to be a second generation believer. So the author thinks he's a second generation believer. He says it was revealed to us. Okay. Apollos is a second generation believer. He is known for his rhetoric. If you go to where the author of Hebrews quotes Psalm 40, he literally has intended, when it says, "My ear you have pierced," it's kind of weird. It doesn't really ring nice. It doesn't have the kind of oomph you expect. It's because you can't hear it. In Greek, he is a rhetorician. Okay, he is entertaining his audience and increasing the memorability of what he says by the consonants he uses in the Greek. So this dude's super attentive to words, so it's very eloquent. All of these things match up with Apollos in the New Testament. He was known for his eloquence. He boiled. He was very zealous, and he loved Scripture, and he knew the Old Testament Scriptures like nobody's business. Okay, and indeed, we have this young Jewish guy. And where is he from? Alexandria. It's in the Book of Acts. So and because he says he still partners with Timothy, that's another indication to me, because there was a lot of there was a lot of how do you say this? Shared yoke work. They shared. Often Apollos would share the yoke with Timothy and Paul. So it's very plausible that after Paul's dead, Timothy continues with that work and he continues sharing that work with Apollos. So that's where I get the idea that that would be why I would argue rather that Apollos is the author of Hebrews. But we come back to this right here, which is this idea that the center. The point of creation is to complete. The point of creation is that God's image would be born all the way down and brought up to oneness. In other words, the point of creation is an ascended one, a high one. The work of creation is synonymous with a descent. The work itself, the craftsmanship, is a descending representation, so that all the way down, that which is beneath begins to respond to the work of the Malach, the angels, the representative, and then rises up and ascends and bears the image of God. Okay, this is the opposite of, a lot of Eastern philosophy, Hellenistic metaphysics. It's opposed to the cosmologies of a lot of these guys too. So that you have this. It really is. It's behind so much religion and religious philosophy. It's the idea that to really define divinity, you have to say it's other than, it's transcendent. It doesn't want to be part of this. It's away from this. In fact, to make contact with it, you have to be essentially destroyed step by step to where you're ultimately abolished and removed. But the Torah says it's almost like repeating temples all the way down for God to occupy and fill all of them. But one of the things is, how do we know when the temple's completed? Okay, this is weird, but think about the step of maturity, from infancy to a little baby to a child to, in terms of hierarchy among humans, to a woman's position, something like this, a man, a master, this kind of picture, whatever. You can see these household hierarchical distinctions in the image of God when you look at the tabernacle itself. And one of the interesting things is there is a simple idea that's at work here. We have an image, we have a representation, okay, and then the work of creation itself becomes this: looking at the perfect, looking up at the perfect, turning to the imperfect and molding it in the image of the perfect, looking up at the perfect, molding the image. This is in this week's Torah reading in Tehillah, where in verse 25, verses 8 and 9, he says, "Thus you will build a tabernacle for me to dwell in their midst." And he says, do according to all of the pattern which I've shown you. Okay? So let me see here. I'm going to look at it. I'm curious about that verse real quick. We're in Exodus 25 and 9. What does it say? The pattern. Okay. Everything I showed you. Okay. And all which I revealed to you, this, the pattern of the tabernacle, the pattern of all its fillings or things that fill it, or vessels. Okay. Thus you will do or make. Thus you will make. So here's something that's very simple. Creation is working towards, if you want to make it divided into two halves or two sides, okay, something like this, high and low, some kind of hierarchy. What will creation look like when it's completed? When it's completed, it will literally be the ark. The highest vessel or cultic object is the ark. It's a micro temple. In fact, the ark is all that's needed for God to go into battle, to rest among the people. It's like a mobile altar. Okay, it's a throne. The ark has it has inside of it everything that's needed. Here's the manna in the jar, staff. Okay. The ark is basically creation completed. And okay. Okay. This is what creation is working towards. God's understanding of authority is working himself out of a job. This is the opposite of Pharaoh, Hasatan, covetous man. Covetous man, Hasatan, Pharaoh, their idea of authority is they lord it over them, and those under them are their benefactors. Right? God's understanding of creation is everyone is his throne in reality is completed when brotherly love is perfected. When all his imagers look at each other in brotherly love, he is enthroned on it. Literally, I mean, that is his throne. This is the big guy's throne, right? Insofar as the work is undone, they have appointed tasks. They have appointed tasks to accomplish. And their appointed task is what defines their hierarchical position. But because of the aim of their appointed task being raising up everyone to the full mature image of God, their task disappears once everyone is mature. If I wanted to say this metaphorically, I could say it like this. Well, when I was a child, I used to think about things in a childish way. When I became a man, I put childish ways behind me. Right now, I prophesy in part. Okay, I see in part, I know in part. But when the perfect comes, the imperfect will disappear. And I'll no longer stare as though dimly into a mirror, but face to face. Okay, that's creation completed. Apostleship, prophet, all these really great appointed tasks, they disappear at the completion of all things. Okay? That's what God's working toward. This is not that.
So he's not. So on the seventh day when he rested,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't complete.
That's exactly right. And we know that, and this is something that's so.
Then, so when it says that we can enter the Sabbath rest through Christ,
That's right.
who's the Word of God.
That's right.
And God did make perfection to come.
Yeah.
And when the perfect comes and this brotherly love
Yeah.
really is, and we bind on earth, but we bind in heaven by the belief in our heart that Jesus Christ is the only way to God.
Yeah.
And we hear and believe his word.
Yes.
Isn't that what the Hebrews is saying, how we enter?
Yeah, what you're saying is that, imagine it like this, Rick. So you have imagine the equivalent of an assembly line, okay? And there's an object that's got to go through multiple processes to get to the final perfect form and dropped out into a bucket. Imagine if that object had some role in keeping the assembly line pushing it along, right? If the object was alive and we couldn't violate its will, okay? That's what you just described. We are that object being perfected. The mechanism that keeps the line moving is what you've described. It's believing on that word and then progressing in the faith.
Right.
So the progression in the faith, the taking hold, I have not yet taken hold of that which is perfect, but I strive on. Yes, that's the idea. So that what we then do is we say, we have begun the process. The process of perfection has been initiated for those who are in the Messiah. And Hebrews actually speaks about this.
Right.
It says we are not yet, we're not finished.
And
we've not yet been perfected.
That's right. And why do we not enter the Sabbath rest? Because of disobedience, it plainly says.
Yes, that is one. Okay, another.
Because we're not believing the word of God.
Yes.
That's in that tells us go boldly before it.
Yeah.
And receive this direction. You can stop working.
Yeah.
You can stop trying to basically figure it all out because the word I've spoken to you has made you clean already.
That's right. So another way to say that, because it's Hebrews is quoting what happened in Numbers 14, is to say a rejection of the work by a worker is death and exile. Okay? And so, because the fear they have, because they talk about Joshua, he literally quotes Joshua. He says if Joshua had been able to give them rest, then we wouldn't have need for another from the tribe of Judah to descend from David, this kind of thing. Well, what was standing in the way of Joshua giving them rest, even if Joshua could have? The fucking giants. The work was to attack and defeat the giants in the land and to remake the land. They are rejecting the work and therefore cannot experience the rest.
Could I say that maybe it was when Joshua said, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord.
Yeah.
You can't. You've never been able to, and you're not done.
Yeah.
Is that possible that that's what it kept them out?
Them not serving the Lord?
They're disobedient.
Absolutely. No, and that's the word. The word there for service is a word for work, right? That's avodah. So it's not this word, but it's avodah. It's the same word used for priests. Priests are slaves. They're workers. They are God's eved. They're his slave. So the work, when he says, I've got this work to do, this dovetails nicely with this idea that God's representatives who are entrusted with a representation to do craftsmanship, okay, that this is the path to rest. The path to rest is completing your work. Just like God completed his work is one way to say it. The path to rest is completing your work. If you reject the work, you reject the rest that would follow it. And the grounds for rejecting the work in Scripture are always about the representative rejecting the word or deeming unfaithful the one they're supposed to represent. So it's in other words to say that, because we're talking about hierarchy with angels and jobs and the descent. Sin, one way to describe sin is it is a hierarchy disorder. It's a hierarchy disorder.
Right.
Which is why, how does sin enter? Well, sin enters through the wife usurping the role of the husband. Well, that's not the only hierarchy disorder. Sin enters through the lowly creature, the serpent, usurping the role of Adam, humans. Right? Sin enters for Israel through, there's so many different ways. The Gentile nation of Egypt usurping the godly, Abraham's descendants and enslaving them. Okay, this is an idea that's repeated over and over and over again. Korach is one of the best examples, a lowly one who takes over and tries to make himself high. And I want us to get hold of the idea, I want us to connect this, to craftsmanship. The world is not completed, and it's such a simple, I actually said this morning to Stella, it's a simple idea that's taught in Protestantism, and it's one of the most pernicious ideas. Okay, it's in Augustine. It's in people's idea of what heaven's like. It's in people's understanding of the fall and the human condition. And it's this idea: when God made all things, they were perfect. You hate that shit. It's not perfect. It was not perfect, because if we're using the word perfect, we have to then go to the text. What is the word for perfect in Hebrew? It's going to be shalom, or completed, finished. Okay? It is not completed, otherwise humanity has no mandate. Humanity has a mandate. And the mandate that's given to humanity has verbs in it that are negative. The mandate for humanity has verbs in it that are militaristic. The words used for trampling and defeating your enemies, those verbs, okay, they're used for Isaac. It's prophesied over Isaac that his seed his seed will defeat his enemies and trample them and crush them in the gate. This kind of picture. Those are the same words used for subjugate and dominate or subdue the animals. It is not completed and it is not perfect. If there's something that's near perfect, it's Eden, okay? And then those who are the humanity that was within, that is entrusted with access to Eden, their job is to then take that perfection and do its equivalent outside of Eden, spread Eden. One of the things that is helpful with this is 1, 2, 3, 4. It is echad, it is a whole, it is a unity, right? But each of these spaces has a space in their own right. One of the claims of the Torah is what the priest, every action of the priest inside, or every action of the priest in the courtyard has its equivalent action inside the tent, which has its equivalent action inside the Holy of Holies. But guess what? It works its way backwards. Every action of the priest inside sacred space has its equivalent outside in the camp among the Israelites, which has its equivalent in Israel's dealing with other Gentiles. Okay? So the idea is when God is looking for perfection, okay, or completion, he's looking for his image to be born and fully brought out to bear so that it transforms other imagers to bear his image in every single place. Okay? He wants to transform the low places to look like the Holy of Holies, which is why he's kind. He showed us the beginning from the end. This becomes like a parable, a physical parable, or a symbol of Sabbath, of completed creation. It's what we're working towards. It's the pattern, the Tavnit, that we look back at and we say, that's what we're aiming for. I have to do the work here of completing all things. This is a very ancient idea. It's very relevant for Jews today, and Christians have completely kind of dropped the ball and left it. They call it tikkun ha'olam. It's called the repair of the world, or fixing reality. Okay, repairing reality. They have a lot of weird ideas.
What's olam again?
Olam is world.
Okay.
World.
Does it need reparation though? If Eden was already like near to perfect and Yahweh saying to subjugate it.
The word tikkun olam is post-fall, so after the fall. But even so, you would still have the idea of you have two words. Watch. Jesus said it last week in our gospel reading. Yeshua talks about the Son of Man, and he talks about the future time eschatologically, and he says the completion of creation.
Yeah.
He talked about that in last week's gospel reading. But then also, in the book of Acts, Peter has this belief about the church. Peter wants the message to spread as quickly and as rapidly as possible because Peter believes if people will complete the task and the work, it will speed the coming of the Messiah. And he literally says, heaven has received the Son until we accomplish until the restoration of all things be accomplished.
The gospel is spread everywhere.
Yeah, well, specifically, he says the restoration of all things, and the word for restoration there has nothing to do with the message. It's a word used for repairing a temple. So when we fix reality, which is God's temple, when we do the work of repairing it and fixing it, then the Son will be given to us. He has this idea that, you know why he has the idea? Because he's a Jew. Because the same thing happened in Exodus 40. As soon as they erected the temple and repaired it and fixed it, what did the glory do? Descend. They think Yeshua is the glory. So they absolutely believe that they can speed along the coming of the Messiah.
Yeah.
There's urgency in it. Now, the sad thing is God's slowness to anger is shocking to them. Peter's one of the Jews who asked the question, will you now restore the kingdom to Israel? In Acts 1, right? And Yeshua gives him a really difficult answer. He's tricky still, and he's like, the times are set by my Father, but the message is going to go from here to Judea, to Samaria, to the ends of the earth. They probably thought, I almost guarantee you, based on what you read in Acts 15, they thought, oh, well, he's concerned about exilic Jews. He just wants to get the message out there to Jews everywhere. Jews that are far away. They never dreamed that the gospel would be for Gentiles. Guess what else? Nobody ever dreamed. Nobody also dreamed that there would be a continent called North America,
Which is funny.
or a continent called South America.
First Peter starts off by only talking to Gentiles.
That's why.
He says the diaspora, but he very much pivots. Because now you Gentiles.
Yeah.
Is us completing our work the same as the completion of all things?
It is a part of it. So if you are a part of all things, and you have an appointed task, then every person's work is really infinitely valuable. You will have a task. You will be judged for the work that you did.
Yeah.
You will be judged for the work that you were entrusted with and what you were supposed to accomplish.
Yeah.
There are some things that were generically entrusted to all of us, but then there are peculiar special tasks that are appointed.
I'm wondering when I die, is there still work?
Yes, I would say yes, but not toil, right? Like,
I would
our work would not be cursed.
but this is where the English word. Yes, there's the English word work. There's no more of this. Malacha, it's done. What you see is like Revelation 4.
Yeah.
The work that is left is the work of feasting, enjoying the music, dancing. It's literally the work of enjoying the imagers, enjoying each other, and with creation itself, right?
What
So-
Jesus mean when he says it is finished?
I think it is. I think there's so many. I can't. I think there are a lot of things.
In other words, my question really
Yeah.
is he wasn't the completion of all things?
He is. He says, "I am the resurrection and the life." But the question then becomes, does he complete all things right now? You guys are gone. I love you. Bless you.
There you go.
So I'll close with this. The question is Jesus is the completion of all things. So the question is, does Jesus have a timeline that he follows? Does he have times that are set? He does. So he'll say weird things like, these times are set by my Father for when the time is to come for my return. He'll say things like, or we'll hear things like in Hebrews, we do not yet see all things under his feet. Right? There's a process wherein he's going to be obedient to the times being set. But ultimately, yeah, he's going to be the completion of all things. Do you have any more anything you think is more useful? I'm going to shut this down. And then we can chill here. All right. You will no longer be live. Great.
Because a lot of